The morning sun painted the circus ring in shades of amber and gold, but its warmth couldn't touch the cold horror that gripped every soul present. Magnificent Stormbreaker, the stallion whose silver coat had once gleamed like moonlight on water, lay motionless in the center of the performance ring. His powerful legs, which had carried audiences to breathless wonder for 7 years, were folded beneath him in an unnatural stillness that spoke of finality. Sheriff Cornelius Bridgewater stood at the ring's edge, his weathered hands gripping the wooden barrier until his knuckles turned white. The badge on his vest caught the light as his chest rose and fell with barely controlled emotion. Behind him, the gathered crowd of performers and townspeople whispered in hushed tones, their voices creating a symphony of grief and disbelief. 15 minutes, Bridgewater announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. That's all I'm giving you people to say your goodbyes. Then we clear this ring and put this animal out of its misery. His words were meant to sound official, authoritative, but those who knew him could hear the tremor beneath the steel. The circus folk exchanged glances, heavy with unspoken understanding. Stormbreaker wasn't just any horse, he was the heart of Wandering Moon Circus, the magnificent creature who had taught 3 generations of performers to dream beyond the confines of their small traveling world. Master trainer Joaquin Castellanos knelt beside the fallen stallion, his calloused hands moving gently across the horse's neck, checking for signs of life that everyone knew wouldn't be there. Something's not right about this, whispered Magnolia. Fairweather, the circus owner, her painted smile long since washed away by tears. Stormbreaker was healthy yesterday, strong as ever during evening practice. Dr. Peregrine Ashworth, the town's veterinarian, crouched beside Joaquin, his experienced hands examining the horse with clinical precision. No visible injuries, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. No signs of struggle. It's as if he simply ... stopped. The crowd began to thin as Bridgewater's deadline approached. Some couldn't bear to watch. Others stayed out of respect, forming a loose circle around the ring. The sheriff checked his pocket watch, its brass face reflecting his grim expression. In 10 minutes, he would have to make good on his promise. The town couldn't afford to have a dead horse creating a spectacle, drawing flies and disturbing the peace. But as fate would have it, not everyone had arrived yet. The sound came first, clear, haunting melody that seemed to drift from the very air itself. It started as barely a whisper, a tune so pure and ethereal that it made hardened cowboys remove their hats and circus performers pause mid-conversation. The melody grew stronger, more distinct, until it became clear that someone was singing. That someone was Persephone Nightingale, a 12-year-old girl with hair the color of autumn leaves and eyes that held depths far beyond her years. She had been Stormbreaker's closest companion, the only person who could calm the stallion when thunderstorms rolled across the prairie or when strange dogs barked too close to the circus wagons. Persephone walked into the ring with steps that seemed to float rather than touch the ground, her voice never wavering from its haunting song. The language was unknown to those gathered. Perhaps something ancient, perhaps something that existed only in the secret places of a young girl's. Hart Sheriff Bridgewater raised his hand to halt the girl's approach, his mouth opening to deliver a stern warning about disturbing a crime scene. But the words died in his throat as Persephone's voice washed over him like a tide of liquid silver. The melody she wove seemed to pull something fundamental from the very air around them, creating a pocket of stillness where even the wind held its breath. The gathered crowd found themselves unable to move, not from paralysis, but from a deep, inexplicable need to listen. Magnolia, Fairweather, felt tears streaming down her cheeks without knowing when they had started. Dr. Ashworth's clinical detachment crumbled as the song reached into places in his heart he had forgotten existed. Even the usually stoic Joaquin found his vision blurring as memories of Stormbreaker's greatest performances flooded back. Persephone's bare feet made no sound on the sawdust as she approached the fallen stallion. Her song never paused, never faltered, as if the melody had been living inside her for years, waiting for this moment to be born. She knelt beside Stormbreaker's massive head, her small hands coming to rest on his silver mane. The horse's coat, which had grown dull in death, seemed to shimmer under her touch. At first, those watching attributed it to tricks of light, the morning sun playing games with their grief-stricken eyes. But as Persephone's song grew stronger, the shimmer became undeniable. Silver threads of light began to dance across Stormbreaker's body, following the paths of his muscles, outlining the powerful frame that had once carried him through impossible leaps and graceful pirouettes. "What incarnation?" Bridgewater breathed, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm before falling away. Whatever was happening here, it was beyond the jurisdiction of earthly law. Dr. Ashworth rubbed his eyes, certain he was experiencing some sort of grief-induced hallucination. But when he looked again, the light was still there, growing brighter with each note that spilled from the girl's lips. The veterinarian in him wanted to step forward, to examine this impossible phenomenon, but something deeper, some primal understanding that existed before science and reason kept him rooted in place. The song began to change, its haunting quality giving way to something else. Where before it had spoken of loss and endings, now it whispered of beginnings, of second chances, of love so pure it could challenge the fundamental laws of existence. Persephone's voice rose and fell like a prayer, like an incantation, like a conversation with forces that dwelt beyond the veil of ordinary experience. The light emanating from Stormbreaker's body began to pulse in rhythm with the girl's song. Each note seemed to breathe life into the silver threads, making them dance and swirl until the entire horse appeared to be made of captured starlight. The sawdust beneath him began to glow, creating a perfect circle of radiance that encompassed both horse and girl. Joaquin gasped and stumbled backward. He had seen the impossible before: horses that seemed to fly, acrobats who defied gravity, magicians who made reality bend to their will. But this was different. This was real magic, the kind that existed in ancient stories and forgotten dreams. The child's in some kind of trance, Magnolia whispered to Dr. Ashworth. Look at her eyes. Indeed, Persephone's eyes had taken on an otherworldly quality, reflecting the silver light that surrounded Stormbreaker until they seemed to hold entire galaxies within their depths. Her song had become something beyond mere melody. It was architecture built from sound, a bridge spanning the chasm between life and death. Sheriff Bridgewater found his resolve wavering. His orders had been clear: dispose of the dead animal and restore order. But how could he interrupt something so beautiful, so impossible, so sacred? His 15-minute deadline had come and gone, but time itself seemed suspended within the circle of light. The transformation began with the smallest detailer, single twitch of Stormbreaker's left ear. So subtle was the movement that only Persephone, kneeling inches from the stallion's head, noticed it at first. Her song never wavered, but a smile touched the corners of her lips, as if she had been expecting this very moment. Dr. Ashworth was the second to notice, his trained eye catching the almost imperceptible rise and fall of the horse's ribcage. Impossible, he whispered, but his whisper carried in the hushed air, and heads began to turn toward him. That horse is breathing. Sheriff Bridgewater squinted against the growing radiance, his logical mind reeling. He had checked the animal. Himself no pulse, no breath, eyes fixed and dilated. Whatever was happening here challenged everything he understood about the world. His hand moved unconsciously to his badge, as if the symbol of earthly authority could anchor him in the face of the impossible. Stormbreaker's breathing became more pronounced, and with each inhalation the silver light seemed to pulse brighter. The horse's coat, which had dulled to the grey of weathered pewter, began to regain its lustrous sheen. Muscle definition returned to his powerful frame, and the awkward positioning of his legs straightened into something more natural, more alive. Persephone. Song reached a crescendo that seemed to pull at the very fabric of reality. Her voice, impossibly pure for a 12-year-old girl, carried notes that resonated in frequencies beyond human hearing. The circle of light expanded, encompassing more of the ring, and those standing closest felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun. Joaquin dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by what he was witnessing. In 30 years of working with horses, he had seen them born, watched them grow strong, and held them as they died. But this reversal of the natural order shattered every assumption he had ever held about the boundaries between life and death. Sweet Mother of God, Magnolia breathed, her hands clasped together in unconscious prayer. The child is bringing him back. The statement hung in the air like a challenge to reason itself. Yet, as they watched, Stormbreaker's eyes began to flutter. The dull glaze of death gradually clearing like fog lifting from a mirror. His legs, which had been folded beneath him, in the stillness of the grave, began to unfold with the graceful strength that had made him a legend. Dr. Ashworth took an involuntary step forward, his scientific mind demanding a closer examination of this impossibility. But as his boot touched the edge of the light circle, a gentle but firm resistance pushed him back. Whatever forces Persephone had called upon were not yet finished with their work. The girl's song began to soften, transitioning from the powerful crescendo to something more tender, more welcoming. It was as if she was singing not to wake the dead, but to welcome the living back to the world they had left behind. Her hands moved in slow, soothing patterns across Stormbreaker's neck, and the horse responded with a soft, nickering sound that brought tears to every eye present. Sheriff Bridgewater felt his authority slipping away like sand through his fingers. The rules and regulations that governed his world had no provisions for resurrections performed by singing children. His duty demanded he maintain order, but what order could contain something like this? Stormbreaker's eyes opened fully, and they held the same intelligence, the same gentle spirit that had made him beloved throughout 3 counties. But there was something more now, a depth that spoke of journeys taken beyond the veil of ordinary existence, of wisdom gained in places where such wisdom was never meant to be found. The horse lifted his magnificent head, silver mane cascading, like a waterfall of liquid moonlight. His gaze found Persephone first, and in that moment of recognition, the bond between them became visible to all threads of golden light that connected their hearts like an unbreakable chain. Rose to his feet with fluid grace, as if death had been nothing more than a brief, restful sleep. The silver radiance that had surrounded him began to fade, but it didn't disappear entirely. Instead, it settled into his coat like stardust, giving him an ethereal quality that would mark him as something beyond ordinary horses for the rest of his days. Sheriff Bridgewater stood frozen in a moment of choice that would define not only his career but his very understanding of the world. His training told him to document what he had witnessed, to file reports, to find rational explanations for the impossible. But his heart, the part of him that had once been a boy who believed in magic, whispered different counsel. Persephone's song had ended, but its echoes seemed to linger in the air, in the sawdust, in the very boards of the circus ring. She remained kneeling beside Stormbreaker, her small hand resting on his neck, her eyes slowly returning from their otherworldly depths to their natural emerald green. When she looked up at the assembled crowd, she appeared nothing more than a tired 12-year-old girl who had just performed the greatest miracle any of them would ever witness. "You folks saw nothing here today," Bridgewater announced suddenly, his voice carrying the authority of his office, but tempered with something that hadn't been there before: wonder. "There was a sick horse, and now there's a healthy horse. Dr. Ashworth made a misdiagnosis in the poor light. These things happen." Dr. Ashworth opened his mouth to protest, then closed it as he met the sheriff's steady gaze. Slowly, understanding dawned in the veterinarian's eyes. Some truths were too dangerous for the ordinary world, too precious to be dissected by those who would reduce miracle to mere anomaly. "That's right," Dr. Ashworth said carefully, his voice finding strength as he spoke. "Poor lighting can cause errors in assessment. I'm pleased to report that Stormbreaker appears to be in perfect health." Magnolia Fairweather caught on quickly, her showwoman's instincts recognizing the need to protect her people and their impossible gift. "We're grateful for the doctor's thorough examination," she said, stepping forward to place a protective hand on Persephone's shoulder, "and for the sheriff's patience while we sorted things out." The crowd began to disperse, but not in the usual way of people leaving an ordinary scene. They moved slowly, reverently, each person taking time to look once more at Stormbreaker and the girl who had called him back from the beyond. Many would spend the rest of their lives wondering if they had truly seen what they thought they had seen. But none would ever speak of it directly. Joaquin approached Stormbreaker with tears streaming down his weathered face. The horse turned to him with gentle recognition, allowing the trainer's hands to run over his neck, his flanks, his legs checking for any sign of the death that had claimed him less than an hour before. There was nothing. The stallion was perfectly, impossibly whole. "How?" Joaquin whispered to Persephone, but the girl only smiled and shook her head. "Some songs can only be sung once," she replied, her voice carrying a maturity that seemed at odds with her young face. "And some love is stronger than the rules that say it can't be." Sheriff Bridgewater found himself walking toward the girl and the horse, his official duties warring with his human curiosity. When he stopped before them, Stormbreaker regarded him with eyes that held no fear, only a kind of ancient patience. "This stays between us," Bridgewater said, though he wasn't entirely sure who he was addressing: the girl, the horse, or the universe itself. "The world's not ready for this kind of truth." Persephone nodded solemnly. "The song chooses when it can be heard," she said. "Today, it chose all of you." As the morning sun climbed higher, casting normal shadows across the circus grounds, the impossible gradually settled into the realm of the accepted. But those who had been present would carry something changed within them, knowledge that the boundaries they had always accepted were far more fluid than they had ever dared to imagine. In the days that followed, Wandering Moon Circus continued, its performances as scheduled, but something fundamental had shifted in the troupe's dynamic. Stormbreaker performed with an otherworldly grace that left audiences speechless, his movements flowing like poetry written in living silver. Those who had witnessed his resurrection found themselves performing with a deeper commitment to their art. as if they had been given a glimpse of the sacred thread that connected all. Performance to the realm of pure wonder. Persephone resumed her normal duties, caring for the animals, helping with costume repairs, practicing her own modest acrobatic routines. But Joaquin noticed that the other horses seemed drawn to her now in a way they never had before. They would turn their heads when she passed, following her with their eyes as if she carried some invisible light that called to something deep in their animal souls. Sheriff Bridgewater found himself making excuses to visit the circus grounds. Officially, he was ensuring that all local ordinances were being followed. But privately, he was drawn by something he couldn't name. Sometimes he would catch sight of Persephone singing softly to the horses during their evening care, and though he could never quite make out the words, the melody would follow him home and linger in his dreams. Dr. Ashworth took to visiting Stormbreaker regularly, ostensibly for routine health checks, but actually to study the impossible. The horse showed no signs of having ever been anything but vibrantly alive, yet the veterinarian could swear that sometimes, in certain lights, he could see silver threads running through the stallion's coat like veins of starlight. The circus's reputation began to grow in unexpected ways. Word spread, not of the resurrection, for those who had witnessed it kept their covenant of silence, but of performances that transcended mere entertainment. Audiences left the circus grounds changed, carrying with them a sense that they had witnessed something that approached the divine. Magnolia Fairweather noticed the change in their crowds. People came seeking more than diversion. They came hungry for wonder, for proof that the world held mysteries beyond their daily struggles. The circus responded by deepening their commitment to their art, each performance becoming a kind of prayer offered to the possibility of magic. One evening, as autumn painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson, a traveling reporter from the state capital arrived to write a feature story about the circus that had been drawing such unusual acclaim. His name was Bartholomew Quill, and he carried himself with the skeptical air of a man who had seen too much of the world's disappointments to believe in its wonders. Quill watched the evening performance with a critical eye, taking notes on what he assumed would be standard circus fare, dressed up by rural hyperbole. But as Stormbreaker entered the ring with Persephone on his back, something in the reporter's expression began to change. The horse moved with such fluid grace, such impossible beauty, that Quill found his pen stilling in his hand. Persephone began to sing as they performed not the otherworldly song that had called Stormbreaker back from death, but something gentler, more earthly, yet still touched with the same mysterious quality. The audience fell silent, transfixed, and even. The hardened reporter felt tears he couldn't explain dwelling in his eyes. After the performance, Quill sought out Magnolia, his notebook forgotten in his jacket pocket. "There's something different about this place," he said, his voice unusually quiet. "Something I can't quite put my finger on." Magnolia smiled, the painted expression giving way to something genuine and warm. "We believe in the magic we create," she replied simply. "And sometimes, if you believe deeply enough, the magic believes in you back." Quill left the next morning without writing his story. Some experiences, he realized, were too precious to be reduced to mere words, too sacred to be shared with those who hadn't earned the right to witness them through presence and openness of heart. Years passed, and Wandering Moon Circus became a legend that traveled far beyond the routes they actually followed. Stories spread of performances that defied explanation, of a silver horse whose beauty could move hardened men to tears, and of a girl whose songs could touch something fundamental in the human soul. Those who had been present on that impossible mourning kept their secret. But they could not hide the way the experience had changed them. Sheriff Bridgewater never spoke of what he had witnessed, but his approach to law enforcement grew more nuanced, more compassionate. He found himself giving second chances where once he would have demanded swift justice, understanding somehow that the rigid application of rules could sometimes miss the deeper truths of human experience. Dr. Ashworth incorporated a new gentleness into his veterinary practice, treating each animal with the reverence due to a creature that might carry sparks of the divine. He never again pronounced an animal dead without spending long, careful moments listening for the subtlest signs of life that might linger beyond ordinary perception. Joaquin aged into a master trainer whose reputation spread throughout the Western territories. Students came from hundreds of miles away to learn from the man who could communicate with horses in ways that seemed almost supernatural. He never revealed the source of his deeper understanding, but those who worked with him noticed that he would sometimes pause in his training to listen, as if hearing melodies that existed just beyond the range of normal human hearing. Persephone grew into a young woman of extraordinary grace and wisdom. Though she never again sang the song that could wake the dead, she seemed to understand instinctively that such gifts came with great responsibility and could only be used when the universe itself called for their expression. But her presence continued to work smaller miracles, daily calming frightened animals, bringing peace to troubled hearts, and serving as a bridge between the practical world and the realm of wonder. Stormbreaker performed for 7 more years, each show a testament to the power of love to transcend even the fundamental laws of existence. When he finally passed away naturally, peacefully, surrounded by those who loved him, Persephone did not sing him back. Instead, she held his great head in her lap and hummed a different song, one that spoke of completed journeys and earned rest, of love that continues beyond the boundaries of physical existence. The circus continued, carrying forward the spirit of that impossible morning when a girl's love proved stronger than death itself. New performers joined the troupe, drawn by stories they had heard and dreams they couldn't quite articulate. The show evolved, but it never lost the quality that had been born in those moments. When silver light danced in the ring and the impossible became real, Magnolia Fairweather lived to be 93, and on her deathbed, surrounded by 3 generations of circus folk, she spoke her final words. The song never really ends, you know. It just waits for the right voice to sing it again. Those who heard her smiled through their tears, understanding that some truths are too beautiful to die, some miracles too precious to be limited by time or circumstance. The Wandering Moon Circus continues to this day, and sometimes, just sometimes, when the light is just right and the audience's hearts are open enough to hear it, the wind carries the echo of a song that once proved love stronger than death, wonder more real than doubt, and magic as natural as breathing for those brave enough to believe in the end. That may be the greatest miracle of all. Not that a horse was raised from the dead, but that the experience of witnessing such love and wonder continued to ripple outward through years and lives, touching hearts and opening minds to possibilities that exist just beyond the edge of ordinary sight, waiting to be discovered by those who remember how to sing the songs that matter most.